And this is our introduction to the Radio Labs. This is Radio Lab B. This is Radio Lab A, which I'll be reviewing. Okay, so this first lesson really is quite straightforward, but it's how to turn the equipment on and off safely. It's also how you should find the room and how you should leave the room. Notice there is, and it might be a little hard to see, but there is a plastic cover covering this piece of equipment we call the console or the radio board. When you take it off, please make sure you know where you left it. The keyboard is typically here, but it does get moved out of the way, which I'm going to do right now. Sometimes we might find it up on top, we may find it in the corner, but as long as it's not on the floor or dangling, we're fine. So what you see here is the board. It is in a state we call normaled, all right? That means all the faders, these things are called faders, are all the way down, and all of these knobs are all the way counterclockwise. We want to check this before we do anything else. The reason for that is several, but we'll go through them. But again, the basic idea is that it's a safe way to start the board up. Don't wear headphones, don't plug anything in while you're starting up. And the reason for that is very simple. We don't want any audible pops to damage your ears. So the first thing we normally do is turn on this rack. It is, as you face the equipment, it's the rack to your left. Simply turn it on and make sure that this equipment comes on. You should not be turning anything on or off individually. After this powers, we'll go to the rack on the right. Now, it's worth noting that the Radio Labs are basically identical in terms of equipment, but not in setup. There's only one rack in Radio B. Typically, there are only two pieces of equipment that will come on, this headphone amplifier and this recorder. But it will also turn on our board for us. Now, once you've turned on these two racks, it's going to look like this has not powered. The first thing to do is just push the program button over here. Once this lights, you can't turn it off. This will stay on. One of these three lights will stay on now constantly. Just make sure program is pushed. You can now start to turn these up, even though there's nothing really on yet. I wouldn't turn them past the 12 o'clock or the straight up and down position. As a matter of fact, I keep them closer to 11 o'clock. There's one last thing to turn on, and that is what is connected to this screen. There's a computer in here, and it turns on like any other PC. You can flip this panel down just to see what you're doing, and the power button is right next to where it says Elite Desk. This will now power up like any other computer. The password for this system is Future1, capital F, U-T-U-R-E, the number 1, and enter. This will bring up what we call the virtual cart or the automation, and you can access that by clicking on the Apex Live software. We'll go over every piece of equipment in greater detail, but for right now, just know that it is identified on the board as the Digilink, and it is only available on this channel, channel 9. The microphone that looks like this in each room is referred to as microphone number 1 and can be found on the board in the microphone 1 position. This microphone, or this style of microphone in each room, is referred to as microphone number 2 and can be found in the mic 2 position. The basic board setup is going to be specific to each task, but in general, these buttons are now referred to as keys. I'll be referring to any button on this board as a key from now on. And the only keys you are really concerned with are the top ones that say program, or the yellow ones that say Q. Talk, you can ignore. Talk actually has nothing to do with talking. Okay. And at this level, we will not be using audition either. The last key that we're not going to worry about is this one that says talk to caller. The final thing is going to be, again, specific to each task that I give you, but since we call these keys, that is also not only the name of the button, but it's also the action of the button. So we would call this keying in or keying out. So if we turn something on, we key into it. If we turn it off, we key out of it. The other major portion are the VU meters. We'll talk about those specifically, but for now you can kind of think of them as a speedometer. They measure the amount of gain going through the board. We'll speak about those at another time, and we'll go over them in greater detail as to what's a good level and what are bad levels. Sort of like these that are barely moving or moving way too much. Again, when we talk about microphones and setting levels on the board, we'll talk about them much, much more in detail. So at the end of your session, it's important to shut everything down in a proper sequence. One of the ways I like to do it is normal the board again. That means all the faders are down, all the keys are off. Again, remember, this one cannot be turned off. So it's always going to be selected between one of them, but that's okay. Finally, make sure all these knobs are turned all the way down to counterclockwise. The next thing would be to shut down the virtual cart machine or the automation or the Digilink. You can simply do that by Xing out of the program and then shutting the computer down like any other computer. I prefer to let the entire PC shut down, which happens fairly quickly. Once you've done that, turn the power off on the right side and then on the left side. Before you go, make sure you cover your console, and if possible, cover the keyboard also. So that's the basics of how to properly turn on and turn off the radio labs. Again, the labs are not exactly identical, but the procedures are the same. Turn the racks on first, then turn the computer on. When you're shutting them down, again, turn the computers off and then shut the racks. It's basically the reverse order. The final step is leave the room, at least in the condition, if not better than you found it. Please make sure that the chair is pushed back under the table, and again, that equipment is properly covered. That's it for lesson 1.